Rich man lost his wallet. The homeless woman who returned it got more than she dreamed. The rain hammered against the sidewalk of downtown Chicago with relentless fury, turning the bustling Michigan Avenue into a blur of umbrellas and hurried footsteps. Robert Sterling pulled his expensive wool coat tighter around his shoulders as he stepped out of his black Mercedes sedan, the car door slamming shut behind him with a satisfying thud that spoke of German engineering and a six-figure price tag. At 52, Robert had everything that money could buy: a penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan, a collection of vintage wines worth more than most people's homes, and a business empire that had made him one of Chicago's most successful real estate moguls. Yet as he walked toward the gleaming glass tower that housed his corporate headquarters, something felt off. His hand instinctively reached for his back pocket, where his leather wallet usually rested. Nothing. "Damn it," he muttered under his breath, stopping abruptly in the middle of the sidewalk. A businessman in a cheaper suit bumped into him from behind, muttering an apology before disappearing into the crowd. Robert ignored him, frantically patting down all his pockets. His phone, his keys, even his Montblanc pen, everything was there except his wallet. The wallet contained more than just money. His driver's license, credit cards, and most importantly, the only photograph he had of his late wife Sarah, tucked behind his business cards. She had died 3 years ago from cancer, and that photo was one of his most treasured possessions. Robert retraced his steps, his designer shoes splashing through puddles as he headed back toward his car. He remembered taking the wallet out at the coffee shop 2 blocks away, checking his cards before paying. The realization hit him like a cold wave. He must have dropped it somewhere between the cafe and here. 3 blocks away, huddled under the narrow overhang of an abandoned storefront, Margaret Maggie O'Connor pulled her threadbare blanket tighter around her shoulders. At 48, she had been living on the streets for 2 years, ever since losing her job as a hotel housekeeper and subsequently her small apartment. The economic downturn had hit people like her the hardest, those without college degrees, without family money to fall back on, without the safety net that people like Robert Sterling took for granted. Maggie's weathered hands clutched a styrofoam cup of coffee, now cold, that a kind stranger had given her an hour earlier. Her gray-streaked auburn hair was tucked under a knitted cap that had seen better days, and her blue eyes, though tired, still held a spark of dignity that homelessness hadn't managed to extinguish. As she watched the rain create rivers in the gutters, something caught her eye. Half hidden under a newspaper that had blown against the building across the street was what looked like a leather wallet. Dark brown, expensive looking, partially soaked from the rain. Maggie glanced around. The street was nearly empty now. Most people had sought shelter from the storm. She could easily walk over, take the wallet, and disappear into the maze of alleys she knew so well. Lord knows she needed the money. She hadn't eaten a proper meal in 2 days, surviving on day-old pastries from a sympathetic bakery owner and the occasional dollar from passers-by. But as she stared at the wallet, she heard her father's voice, in her head, as clear as if he were standing right next to her. Patrick O'Connor had been a Chicago police officer for 30 years, and he'd raised his daughter with an unwavering moral compass. "Maggie girl," he used to say, "it doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, wearing a 3-piece suit or torn jeans. What matters is what you do when nobody's watching. That's when you find out who you really are." Her father had died 5 years ago, and she often wondered what he would think of her current situation. Would he be disappointed? Would he understand the series of bad luck and worse decisions that had led her here? Taking a deep breath, Maggie stood up, her joints protesting after sitting in the cold for hours. She walked across the empty street, her worn sneakers splashing through the puddles. The wallet was indeed expensive, genuine leather, probably costing more than she used to make in a week. She picked it up carefully, shaking off the rainwater. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. Inside were several credit cards. all bearing the name Robert J. Sterling. There had to be at least $300 in cash, more money than she had seen in months. Behind the bills, she found a driver's license with a photo of a distinguished-looking man with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes, but it was the photograph tucked behind everything else that made her pause. A beautiful woman with warm brown eyes and a radiant smile, standing next to the same man from the license. They looked happy, genuinely happy, in a way that spoke of deep love and shared dreams. On the back of the photo, in careful handwriting, were the words, "Sarah and Robert. Our 20th anniversary, forever and always." Maggie felt tears prick her eyes. She recognized that look of loss, having seen it in her own mirror during the darkest days after her father's death. Whoever this Robert Sterling was, he had loved deeply and lost greatly. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about something far more precious. She carefully closed the wallet and looked at the address on the driver's license. Lincoln Park, one of Chicago's most affluent neighborhoods, probably a 40-minute walk from here. She moved quickly. The rain was starting to lighten, and she could see patches of blue sky between the gray clouds. "What are you doing, Maggie?" she asked herself aloud. You could just mail it to him, let the postal service handle it. But even as she thought it, she knew she wouldn't. Something about that photograph, about the careful way it had been preserved, told her this needed a personal touch. She gathered her few belongings, the blanket, an old backpack containing her worldly possessions, and the cold coffee she couldn't bring herself to waste, and began walking north toward Lincoln Park. Meanwhile, Robert Sterling sat in his office on the 40th floor, staring out at the rain-soaked city below. He had called the credit card companies and put stops on all his cards. He had retraced his steps twice, even offering a $500 reward to anyone at the coffee shop who could find his wallet. Nothing. His assistant, Jennifer, knocked on his office door. "Mr. Sterling? I've called all the local police stations and filed a report. I also contacted the bank about getting you temporary cards." "Thank you, Jen," Robert said without turning around. "You can go home early today if you want. This weather's getting worse." After Jennifer left, Robert continued staring out the window. It wasn't really about the money or even the credit cards. Those could all be replaced. It was Sarah's photograph. In the months following her death, he had thrown himself into work with such intensity that he had barely taken time to grieve properly. That photograph was his anchor, his reminder of what truly mattered in life. He thought about Sarah often, especially on days like this when the rain reminded him of their first date. They had been caught in a sudden downpour outside a Lincoln Park restaurant, and instead of running for cover, Sarah had laughed and danced in the rain, pulling him with her. He had fallen in love with her spontaneity, her ability to find joy in unexpected moments. "I'm sorry, Sarah," he whispered to the window. "I should have taken better care of it." His phone buzzed, probably another business call. Robert let it go to voicemail. For the first time in months, work seemed utterly unimportant. By the time Maggie reached Lincoln Park, the rain had stopped completely, and the late afternoon sun was breaking through the clouds, casting everything in a golden light. The address led her to an imposing brownstone on a tree-lined street where even the sidewalks looked expensive. She stood across the street for several minutes, suddenly aware of how she must look. A homeless woman in tattered clothes, carrying a garbage bag and a backpack, standing in front of one of Chicago's most exclusive neighborhoods. A jogger ran past, giving her a suspicious look. A woman walking her perfectly groomed golden retriever crossed to the other side of the street. Maggie was used to these reactions by now, but they still stung. She reminded herself why she was here and approached the front door. The doorbell echoed through what sounded like a large house. After a moment, she heard footsteps, and the door opened to reveal a tall man with graying hair and tired eyes, the same man from the driver's license, though he looked older and more worn than in his official photo. Robert Sterling looked at the woman standing on his doorstep, clearly homeless, clearly uncomfortable, but standing with a dignity that commanded respect. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "Mr. Sterling?" Maggie's voice was softer than he had expected, with a slight Irish accent that spoke of Chicago's working-class roots. "Yes?" Robert replied cautiously. Living in his neighborhood, he occasionally had people approach him for handouts, though. None had ever come to his home before. Maggie reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out his wallet. "I believe this belongs to you." Robert stared at the wallet in disbelief, then looked back at Maggie's face. How did you find this?" "About 3 miles south of here, near Michigan Avenue. Looked like it had been dropped in the rain." Maggie looked at Robert with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. In her experience, when wealthy men made propositions to homeless women, they usually weren't the kind she was interested in accepting. "I'm listening," she said carefully. Robert seemed to sense her concern. "Nothing inappropriate, I promise. It's just ... This house has 5 bedrooms, and I'm rattling around here alone. The guest house out back hasn't been used since Sarah died. And you've just shown me a level of integrity that I haven't encountered in years of business dealings. What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that maybe we can help each other," Robert said, leaning forward earnestly. "You need a place to stay, and I need to remember what it means to be human again. What it means to connect with someone. Real." Maggie shook her head. "Robert, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I'm not a charity case." "This isn't charity," Robert said quickly. "This would be a job. I've been thinking about hiring someone to help manage the house anyway. Sarah used to handle everything, and since she died, I've let things slide. The garden's overgrown. I eat takeout every night, and I can't remember the last time I had people over. You want to hire me as a housekeeper?" Maggie asked, and Robert could hear the mixture of hope and skepticism in her voice. "I want to hire you as a house manager," Robert corrected. "Someone to help me turn this place back into a home instead of just a house I sleep in. Fair wages, your own space in the guest house, and the chance to get back on your feet properly." Maggie was quiet for a long time, staring into her coffee mug. "Why?" she finally asked. "You don't know anything about me except that I returned your wallet. I could be a drug addict, a thief, mentally ill... Are you any of those things?" "No, but you don't know that." Robert smiled. "I know that you walked 3 miles in the rain to return a wallet full of money to a stranger. I know that you refused a reward because it didn't feel right. I know that you spoke about your father with the kind of love that only comes from being raised by a truly good person. And I know that in 15 minutes of conversation, you've helped me understand grief better than 3 years of therapy. And what if it doesn't work out? What if you decide you don't want a formerly homeless woman living on your property? Then we'll cross that bridge when we come to it," Robert said. "But I don't think that's going to happen." "Do you?" Maggie looked around the beautiful kitchen, then out the window at the guest house Robert had mentioned. It was small but charming, with its own little garden that had clearly been Sarah's project. For 2 years, she had dreamed of having her own space again, her own key, her own address. "I would need to clean up first," she said slowly. "I haven't had a real shower in weeks, and these clothes." "There's a full bathroom in the guest house," Robert said, trying not to sound too eager. "And we can go shopping tomorrow for whatever you need." "I still don't understand why you're doing this." Robert was quiet for a moment, thinking. "Do you believe in divine intervention, Maggie?" "Sometimes. I've been lost for 3 years, going through the motions of living without really being alive, working 18-hour days to avoid going home to an empty house. I was starting to think I'd never feel connected to another human being again." He paused. "And then today, a woman who has every reason to be bitter and angry and selfish shows me a level of kindness and integrity that reminds me there's still good in the world. Maybe we found each other for a reason. Maggie felt tears welling up. In her eyes, what if I mess this up? It's been so long since I've lived like a normal person. Then we'll figure it out together, Robert said gently. What do you say? For the first time in 2 years, Maggie allowed herself to hope. Okay, she whispered. Yes, I'd like to try. Robert smiled, the first genuine smile he'd worn in months. Great, let's get you settled in. The guest house was everything Maggie had dreamed of and more. It had a small living room with a fireplace, a tiny but efficient kitchen, a bedroom with an actual bed, and a bathroom with a shower that had amazing water pressure. There were built-in bookshelves filled with Sarah's collection of mystery novels, and windows that looked out onto the garden she had lovingly tended. Sarah used her sister whenever she visited, Robert explained as he showed Maggie around. She always said this place had good energy. Maggie ran her hand along the kitchen counter, trying to absorb the reality of having her own space again. It's perfect, she said softly. There are towels in the bathroom closet, and I'll order some groceries delivered tomorrow so you can stock the kitchen. For tonight, why don't you get cleaned up and I'll order some dinner for both of us? Nothing fancy, just comfort food. After Robert left, Maggie stood alone in her new home and allowed herself to cry, not the bitter tears of despair she'd shed so many times on the street, but tears of gratitude and overwhelming relief. She thought of her father, wishing he could see her now. I didn't give up, Dad, she whispered to the empty room. I kept my integrity, and it brought me home. The shower was everything she had imagined it would be. Hot water that seemed endless. Soap that actually lathered, shampoo that made her hair feel clean for the first time in months. She stood under the spray until her fingers wrinkled, washing away not just the dirt and grime, but some of the emotional residue of life on the streets. When she emerged, she found that Robert had left a bag outside her door containing a new set of clothes, simple but good quality jeans, a soft sweater, underwear and socks, even a pair of comfortable shoes in what appeared to be her correct size. 20 minutes later, she knocked on Robert's front door feeling more human than she had in 2 years. Wow, Robert said when he saw her. You look wonderful, Maggie blushed slightly. She had caught a glimpse of herself in the bathroom mirror and barely recognized the person looking back. Clean hair, clean clothes, and something in her eyes that had been missing for too long. Hope. Thank you for the clothes. How did you know my size? I have 3 sisters, Robert said with a grin. You develop an eye for these things. Plus, I may have asked the sales clerk for help. They ate dinner together at Robert's kitchen table, Chinese takeout served on actual plates with real silverware. It was simple, but to Maggie it felt like the most elegant meal she'd had in years. So tell me about your business, Maggie said. As they ate, I gathered you're in real estate. Sterling Development, Robert confirmed. We primarily focus on commercial properties and upscale residential developments. It's been very successful, which is both a blessing and a curse. How so? The blessing is obvious: financial security, the ability to live comfortably. The curse is that success can become addictive. After Sarah died, work became my way of avoiding grief. I'd stay at the office until 10 or 11 every night, work weekends, take calls during vacations. Anything to avoid coming home to silence. And now, Robert considered the question. Now I'm wondering what the point of all that success is if you don't have anyone to share it with. Sarah used to say that money was just a tool. What mattered was what you built with it. She sounds like she was very wise. She was. She kept me grounded, reminded me of what was really important. Without her. He trailed off, then looked at Maggie. I'm hoping that having you here will help me remember some of those lessons. Over. The following days, they established a comfortable routine. Maggie proved to be everything Robert had hoped for and more. She had a natural gift for organization and an eye for detail that came from years of professional housekeeping. More importantly, She began to bring life back to the house. She researched Sarah's favorite flowers and replanted the neglected garden. She organized Robert's chaotic home office and set up systems to help him manage his personal affairs more efficiently. She stocked the kitchen with real food and began cooking proper meals, insisting that Robert join her for dinner each evening. "This is incredible," Robert said one evening as they shared a home-cooked pot roast with vegetables from the garden. "I haven't had a meal like this since Sarah was alive. My father taught me to cook," Maggie said. "He said a man raising a daughter on his own had better learn domestic skills, or they both starve." He sounds like he was quite a character. He was, tough as nails on the job, but gentle as a lamb at home. He used to say that true strength wasn't about how hard you could hit, but about how much you could take and keep moving forward with. "Grace," Robert set down his fork and looked at her intently. "Is that what you've been doing? Moving forward with grace?" Maggie considered the question. "I don't know about grace. Some days it felt more like stubborn Irish pride. But yes, I kept moving forward, even when it would have been easier to give up." "That's grace," Robert said quietly. "Grace under pressure." As the weeks passed, their relationship evolved beyond employer and employee. They became friends, confidants, two wounded souls helping each other heal. Robert began leaving work at reasonable hours so he could come home to actual conversation and companionship. Maggie bloomed under the stability and security, her natural warmth and humor returning as the stress of survival lifted from her shoulders. One evening, about a month after Maggie had moved in, they were sitting in the living room after dinner when Robert brought up something that had been on his mind. "Maggie, I've been thinking about what you said about most people being closer to homelessness than they realize. What about it? I want to do something about it. Use some of my resources to help people in situations like yours. But I don't want to just write checks to existing charities. I want to create something more personal, more effective." Maggie leaned forward, interested. "What did you have in mind?" "I was thinking about a program that provides temporary housing and job training for people who are homeless through circumstances rather than addiction or mental illness. People who just need a chance to get back on their feet." "Like a bridge program?" "Exactly. Somewhere safe to live, help with job searches, maybe even connections to employers who are willing to give people a second chance. What do you think?" Maggie was quiet for a long moment. "I think it's a wonderful idea, but you'd need someone who understands the reality of homelessness to help design it. Someone who knows what people actually need versus what people think they need." Robert smiled. "I was hoping you might be interested in helping me develop it." "Robert, I don't know anything about running programs or managing nonprofits, but you know what it's like to need help and not know where to find it. You know the difference between charity that empowers and charity that enables. And you have the same integrity that made you return my wallet in the first place." Over the following months, they worked together to develop what would become the Sterling O'Connor Foundation. They researched best practices, visited existing programs, and interviewed dozens of homeless individuals to understand their needs and challenges. The foundation's first facility opened a year later, a converted apartment building that provided temporary housing for up to 20 families, along with job training, childcare, and counseling services. Maggie served as the program director, using her own experience to help design services that actually address the root causes of homelessness rather than just its symptoms. On the day of the grand opening, Robert and Maggie stood together watching as the first families moved into their temporary but dignified new homes. "Your father would be proud," Robert said quietly. "I think so too," Maggie replied. "He always said that our job in life was to help each other carry the load. I finally feel like I'm doing that again." "We're doing that," Robert corrected. "This is our project, our mission." Maggie looked at him with affection. Over the past year, she had watched this grief-stricken, lonely man transform into someone who laughed regularly, who looked forward to coming home, who had found purpose beyond just making money. "Robert, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you think Sarah would approve of what we're doing?" Robert considered the question seriously. "I think Sarah would be proud that her husband found a way to turn his grief into something that helps other people. And I think she would have loved you." That evening, they had dinner together as they did every night, but something had shifted between them. The foundation had given them a shared purpose, but it had also deepened their personal connection in ways neither had expected. "Maggie," Robert said as they cleared the dishes, "I have something to tell you." She looked at him with concern. "What is it?" "I want you to know that you've given me my life back. When you returned that wallet, you didn't just give me back my possessions, you gave me back my faith in human goodness. You reminded me that there are still people in the world who do the right thing simply because it's right." "Robert, let me finish," he said gently. "I know that we started this as a business arrangement, but somewhere along the way, you became the best friend I've ever had. You brought joy back into this house, purpose back into my life. I can't imagine my world without you in it anymore." Maggie felt her heart flutter. Over the months, she had developed feelings for Robert that went beyond friendship, but she had kept them to herself, unsure if he could ever see past her history to the woman she really was. "I feel the same way," she said softly. "You saved my life, Robert. Not just by giving me a home, but by seeing me as a person worth saving when I had stopped seeing that in myself." They stood in the kitchen looking at each other, both afraid to say what they were really feeling. Finally, Robert spoke. "I know this might seem crazy, and I know Sarah will always be part of my heart, but I think I'm falling in love with you, Maggie O'Connor." Tears sprang to Maggie's eyes. "I think I fell in love with you the day you invited me in for coffee and treated me like I mattered." Robert crossed the kitchen and took her hands in his. "We're quite a pair, aren't we? A lonely widower and a formerly homeless woman, finding love in the most unexpected place." "The best love stories are the unexpected ones," Maggie said, standing on her tiptoes to kiss him softly. 2 years later, they were married in the garden behind Robert's house, now their house, surrounded by friends from the foundation, families who had been helped by their programs, and Robert's business associates who had watched him transform from a workaholic recluse into a man who radiated happiness and purpose. As they exchanged vows, Robert included a special promise. "I promise to remember that the most valuable things in life can't be bought or sold. They can only be given freely, from one heart to another." Maggie's vows included her own special promise. "I promise to never stop believing in the power of doing the right thing, even when it's difficult, because I know that integrity can lead to miracles." In the years that followed, the Sterling O'Connor Foundation grew to include facilities in 5 major cities, helping thousands of families transition from homelessness to stability. Maggie became a nationally recognized advocate for homeless services, speaking at conferences and advising government agencies on effective policies. Robert discovered that using his business acumen to help others was far more fulfilling than any deal he had ever closed. He still ran Sterling Development, but now it operated with a social mission, developing affordable housing projects and donating a percentage of profits to homelessness prevention programs. On quiet evenings, they would sit together in their living room, often looking through photo albums that now included pictures of Sarah alongside images of their wedding, foundation events, and the hundreds of families they had helped over the years. "Do you think she knows?" Maggie asked one evening, holding a photo of Sarah from her and Robert's anniversary. "I think she does," Robert replied, pulling his wife closer on the couch. "And I think she's happy that we found each other. Sarah always believed that love multiplies, it doesn't divide. I wish I could have met her." "In a way you did," Robert said thoughtfully. "Every time you show kindness to a stranger, every time you choose integrity over convenience, every time you help someone else find hope, you're honoring the same value she lived by. The foundation isn't just our legacy, it's hers too." 5 years after that rainy day when Maggie found Robert's wallet, they received a letter that brought tears to both their eyes. It was from Maria Santos, one of the first families to go through their program. "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Sterling O'Connor," the letter read, "I wanted you to know that my daughter graduated from nursing school yesterday. When we first came to your foundation, we had been living in our car for 3 months. My husband had lost his construction job, I couldn't find work, and we were about to lose custody of our children. Your program didn't just give us a roof over our heads, it gave us back our dignity and hope. The job training helped my husband become a certified electrician, and the child care program allowed me to finish my education. But most importantly, you showed us that our circumstances didn't define our worth. My daughter wants to work with homeless families now, inspired by the kindness you showed us. She says she wants to pay it forward the way you taught us to do. We will never forget that you saw us as people worthy of help when the world had written us off. Thank you for proving that miracles still happen, and that they often come disguised as ordinary people doing extraordinary things." Robert wiped away tears as he finished reading. "Do you remember what you said that first night? About your father, teaching you that character isn't determined by what happens to you, but by how you respond to it." "I remember. I think this letter proves that wisdom has a ripple effect. Your father's lessons passed to you, then to me, and now to hundreds of families who will carry those values forward to their children." Maggie smiled through her own tears. "He used to say that we're all just walking each other home. I finally understand what he meant." That night, as they prepared for bed, Robert pulled out his wallet, the same leather wallet that had brought them together years earlier. Sarah's photograph was still there, but now it shared space with pictures of Maggie, photos from their wedding, and a small card with the foundation's mission statement. "You know," he said, showing Maggie the wallet's contents, "I used to think this wallet contained everything that mattered to me. Now I realize it was just the beginning." "The beginning of what?" "The beginning of understanding that the most valuable things in life, love, integrity, compassion, purpose, can't fit in a wallet. They have to be lived, shared, and passed on." Maggie kissed him goodnight, thinking about the homeless woman she had been and the life she never could have imagined. Sometimes she still woke up surprised to find herself in a warm bed, in a beautiful home, married to a man who loved her not despite her past, but because of how she had responded to it. The last thing she did each night was look out her bedroom window at the guest house where her new life had begun. It now served as temporary housing for foundation clients in emergency situations, another way of paying forward the kindness that had transformed her world. In the morning, she would wake up and continue the work that had become her passion. But tonight, she simply felt grateful for the rainy day when she had chosen integrity over desperation, honesty over survival, and in doing so, had found not just a wallet, but a whole new life. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness create the biggest miracles. Sometimes what looks like an ending is really a beginning. And sometimes, when you're brave enough to do the right thing, even when it costs you everything, the universe finds a way to give you more than you ever dreamed possible. Robert Sterling had lost a wallet and found a purpose. Maggie O'Connor had returned a wallet and found a home. Together, they had discovered that the richest life is one spent lifting others up, and that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the number of lives you touch along the way. As Chicago slept around them, two souls who had found each other in the most unlikely circumstances continued building a legacy that would outlast them both. Proof that sometimes the most powerful force in the world is simply one person deciding to do the right thing, no matter the cost. The end.
Thank you for watching this story unfold with us here on M&A The Story Unfolds. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new tale. We'd love to know where you're watching from. Leave a comment below and tell us what part of the world you're joining us from. Your support means everything. See you in the next story.